Hello everyone, and welcome to my YNR official 24 channel. Steadfast Jack was the one who saved Matt, left everyone in Genoa City reeling, hearts pounding, minds spinning, and the air thick with disbelief, betrayal, and the kind of tension that could choke even the bravest soul, because no one had suspected Jack of having the audacity, the cunning, the cold-blooded intelligence, and the intricate planning necessary to both rescue Matt from the brink of death and simultaneously orchestrate a plan so devilishly clever, so diabolically layered, that it threatened Victor's very life, his empire, and the fragile equilibrium of everything that people thought they knew about loyalty, power, and the dangerous undercurrents that flowed beneath the surface of Newman Enterprises, where Victor had always reigned with an iron fist, his enemies careful to step lightly around him. But now, with Jack's involvement, that balance had been violently upended, because Jack, whose motives had been wrapped in layers of charm, humor, and occasional sentimentality, had been plotting in the shadows, moving chess pieces in a way that only someone who had lived in the shadow of Victor's dominance for decades could conceive, and the plan itself was the stuff of nightmares, involving deceit, manipulation, and leveraging Matt's vulnerabilities, his anger, and the deep-seated resentment that had festered since he was betrayed, manipulated, and used as a pawn in Victor's games. A plan that required timing, precision, and an intimate knowledge of Victor's routines, his security weaknesses, the trust he misplaced in those he considered family, and Jack had all of this mapped out like a master strategist, sitting in his office or perhaps pacing his living room late at night, reviewing notes, observing, waiting for the perfect moment, because killing Victor was not merely about violence, it was about sending a message, reclaiming power, asserting dominance, and punishing the man who had hurt so many people in their orbit, including Jack himself, whose life had been twisted, manipulated, and threatened countless times by Victor's ruthless ambitions, and the layers of this plan were mind-boggling, involving diversions, false leads, carefully planted information to mislead Victor and his allies, ensuring that when the moment came, Victor would be vulnerable, surrounded by those he trusted least, and unable to anticipate the convergence of events that Jack had engineered with meticulous care, because Jack knew that brute force alone would never be enough, that a successful attempt on Victor's life required psychological manipulation, exploiting weaknesses, fostering mistrust among allies, ensuring that anyone who might intervene would be immobilized by doubt, confusion, or conflicting loyalties, and Matt, caught in the whirlwind of anger, fear, and desperation, became the perfect instrument for Jack's plan. Someone whose impulsiveness could be harnessed, whose desire for revenge could be amplified, whose trust in Jack at the critical moment could tip the scales from chaos into the execution of the scheme. And as Matt grappled with his own conflicted emotions, gratitude for being saved, anger at the circumstances that put him in danger, the burning desire to see Victor pay for the pain inflicted on his life, Jack subtly guided him, gave him the necessary tools, whispered just enough counsel to steer him toward actions that would serve the greater, more sinister design, all while maintaining the veneer of friendship, concern, and loyalty, a performance so convincing that no one, not Nikki, not Victor's most vigilant allies, not even those closest to Matt, suspected the depths of treachery that were at play. And as the plan unfolded, each move calculated with surgical precision, Jack's mind raced ahead, anticipating Victor's responses, predicting his countermeasures, preparing contingency after contingency, because he knew that in a game like this, one misstep could mean failure, exposure, or even death. And the audacity of the plot, the nerve required to manipulate events from the shadows while appearing above suspicion, was staggering. But Jack thrived in that tension, that dangerous edge, that sweet spot where genius and madness intersect. And as Matt executed the actions necessary to draw Victor into the trap, each encounter, each confrontation, each heated exchange layered with double meanings and hidden threats, the tension in Genoa City grew palpable, whispers spreading through Newman Enterprises like wildfire, suspicions and rumors swirling, alliances strained, and Victor, ever vigilant yet blind to the unseen hand guiding events, could sense danger but could not identify its source, a predator in the dark unseen by the prey he thought he controlled, and the emotional complexity of the situation only heightened the drama. Because Jack's plan was not merely a physical threat to Victor but a psychological assault, designed to destabilize him, to make him question the loyalty of those around him, to force him into mistakes, to isolate him, to make him vulnerable at the precise moment when the final pieces of the plan clicked into place, when Matt, torn between vengeance and morality, took actions that aligned with Jack's carefully orchestrated blueprint, unaware of the full extent of Jack's manipulation, and the suspense, the sheer nerve-wracking tension of watching events unfold in real time. As the city held its breath, as Nikki prayed silently for the safety of everyone involved, as Victor's instincts screamed danger but could not yet pinpoint it, as every character in this sprawling drama moved in a dance choreographed by Jack's genius, created an atmosphere that was electric, suffused with shock, anticipation, fear, and the thrilling knowledge that one wrong move could unravel everything. And as the climactic moments approached, with Victor finally realizing that the threat was not external but internal, that the betrayal was from someone he considered an ally, someone he had never doubted, the tension reached a fever pitch, hearts raced, minds raced, and the intricate layers of Jack's plan, the delicate balance of manipulation, timing, and exploitation of human emotion, revealed the terrifying brilliance of the scheme, a plan that was as audacious as it was meticulous, as ruthless as it was clever. And the aftermath promised fallout that would shake Genoa City to its core, leave lasting scars, redefine relationships, power, structures, and the fragile trust that bound families and business alliances together, because when Jack saved Matt, it was never just about protection. It was about setting in motion an unstoppable chain of events, a masterstroke of strategy and manipulation that only someone with his combination of cunning, patience, and audacity could conceive. A plan that reminded everyone that in Genoa City, appearances were always deceiving, loyalties were never absolute, and the next shocking twist was always just around the corner. And as the ripples of Jack's audacious move, the shocking act of saving Matt from certain death, spread throughout the city, the tension multiplied exponentially, because every eye, every mind, every whispering rumor now carried the weight of suspicion, disbelief, and the gnawing sense that nothing in Genoa City would ever be the same again, that a single act of so-called heroism could mask a deeper, more dangerous truth, a truth that none could have imagined, not Nikki, not Victor, not even Matt himself, whose heart raced with a cocktail of relief, confusion, and fear, because while he owed his life to Jack, he could feel, somewhere deep in his gut, that the circumstances surrounding his rescue were not coincidental, that there was a hidden hand guiding his steps, a subtle but inexorable force nudging him toward actions that would serve purposes far larger than his own personal vendettas. And yet, even as he wrestled with this uneasy awareness, he found himself compelled by Jack's words, his encouragement, and the aura of control that Jack exuded, a control that masked something dark, something calculating, something that only someone who had spent decades navigating Victor's ruthless labyrinth of power could pull off, because Jack knew better than anyone how Victor thought, how he reacted, how his ego and pride could be weaponized, manipulated, and ultimately turned against him. And as the days stretched into nights, and nights bled into days, Matt's actions began to follow the invisible choreography laid out by Jack, subtle at first, almost imperceptible, an intercepted message here, a carefully misdirected conversation there, a planted rumor that festered just enough to sow doubt among Victor's most trusted allies. And yet, each act, however minor it seemed, was a deliberate step toward the ultimate confrontation, toward the moment when Victor's carefully constructed empire of influence and intimidation would be exposed as fragile, vulnerable, and riddled with cracks that only someone with Jack's intellect and patience could exploit, because patience was as essential to this plan as boldness, as essential as timing, and Jack had both in spades, his mind a constant whirl of contingencies, counter-contingencies, and psychological maneuvers, all designed to ensure that when the trap snapped shut, Victor would have no possible way to escape, no allies who could intervene in time. and no way to anticipate the orchestration of events that had been years, perhaps even decades, in the making, because every detail, every nuance of Victor's behavior, every idiosyncrasy and weakness had been catalogued, analyzed, and leveraged in a way that only someone with Jack's combination of charm, intelligence, and ruthless focus could accomplish. And as Matt moved forward in his part of the plan, unknowingly executing a script written by Jack, the city itself seemed to hold its breath, as if sensing the magnitude of what was unfolding, the danger, the betrayal, the tension so thick it could be sliced with a knife. And Nikki, torn between hope, fear, and the instinctive desire to protect her family, found herself oscillating between trust and suspicion, wondering if the man she had admired, confided in, and loved in different ways, Jack, was truly the friend he appeared to be, or if beneath his calm, composed exterior lurked a storm of ambition and calculation that could rival Victor's own, while Victor, ever the master of reading people, began to sense an undercurrent of manipulation, a deviation from the expected patterns of loyalty and obedience that had always defined his relationships. Yet even as alarm sounded in his mind, he could not pinpoint the source, could not identify the hand guiding Matt, the invisible strings that pulled at the very fabric of his carefully managed world, and the suspense, unbearable in its intensity, spread like wildfire through the ranks of Newman Enterprises, as employees, allies, and rivals alike sensed something monumental was occurring, though none could articulate it fully, because Jack's plan was not merely about confrontation or revenge. It was about control, about asserting dominance in a way that Victor could neither anticipate nor counter, about exposing vulnerabilities hidden beneath decades of power, about orchestrating a sequence of events so perfectly that the outcome seemed almost inevitable, and yet was the result of precise timing, psychological insight, and relentless strategy. And as each day passed, the tension intensified, with Matt's actions creating subtle cracks in alliances, planting seeds of doubt and suspicion that sprouted into whispered arguments, veiled confrontations, and strained conversations. As Jack watched from the shadows, his mind calculating, anticipating, adjusting, fine-tuning every detail to ensure that Victor remained blind to the full scope of what was happening until it was too late. Because one of the most brilliant aspects of the plan was its invisibility, its ability to manipulate without detection, to guide Matt, to destabilize Victor's network, to fracture trust among allies, all without ever exposing Jack as the architect behind the chaos. And as the plan progressed, the emotional stakes escalated to a nearly unbearable level, because every interaction, every choice, every whispered word carried consequences that could shift the delicate balance between life and death, loyalty and betrayal, power and ruin. And Matt, who had survived the immediate threat to his life thanks to Jack's intervention, now found himself caught in a web of moral ambiguity, unsure whether his actions were truly his own, or if he had become an unwitting pawn in a much larger, far more dangerous game, while Jack, ever composed, ever calculating, manipulated not only the actions of Matt, but also the perceptions of everyone around him, exploiting fear, hope, resentment, and desire in equal measure, crafting situations where Victor would misread intentions, underestimate threats, and make decisions that would ultimately play directly into Jack's carefully orchestrated plan. And as the inevitable confrontation loomed closer, the tension, almost unbearable, reached fever pitch, with every character's inner turmoil amplified by the knowledge that any misstep could be catastrophic, because Jack's genius lay not only in his strategic mind but in his ability to predict emotional reactions, to foresee impulses, to manipulate circumstances so that actions taken in desperation or anger would serve the broader objective. And as Matt approached the pivotal moment, torn between vengeance and conscience, the psychological complexity of the situation intensified, with Jack subtly guiding him through conversation, suggestion, and carefully timed interventions, reinforcing doubts, amplifying fears, and providing just enough guidance to ensure that Matt's decisions aligned with the overarching plan, all while maintaining an appearance of concern, loyalty, and even friendship. A Performance so convincing that none could suspect the true magnitude of Jack's manipulation, and Victor, sensing danger but unable to identify its source, began to experience the mounting pressure of being prey in a world he had always dominated, a predator rendered vulnerable by the invisible hand of a man he trusted, and the suspense, electric and unrelenting, gripped every corner of Genoa City. As characters navigated a landscape of shifting loyalties, veiled threats, and moral ambiguity, with the consequences of each decision echoing across relationships, power structures, and the delicate balance of influence that had defined the Newman Empire for decades, and as the climax of the plan approached, Jack's intricate strategy reached its final, most audacious stage, with Matt positioned to execute actions that, though appearing impulsive and independent, were in fact the culmination of years of observation, planning, and manipulation, a masterstroke of psychological and strategic brilliance that would not only imperil Victor but fundamentally alter the dynamics of power, trust, and influence in Genoa City, leaving lasting repercussions that would be felt for years, because when Jack intervened to save Matt, it was never merely an act of protection. It was the opening move in a calculated, far-reaching, and terrifyingly clever sequence of events designed to upend the world of those who thought themselves untouchable, to redefine relationships, loyalties, and the very meaning of trust. And as the final moments drew near, the city seemed to hold its collective breath, the tension so thick that it was almost tangible, and every heart, every mind, every soul connected to the Newman family and its sprawling network of influence waited, on edge, as the consequences of Jack's audacious intervention and the culmination of his meticulous, multi-layered plan threatened to erupt in a whirlwind of betrayal, revelation, and shock that would leave none untouched, because in Genoa City, as everyone had learned, appearances are always deceiving, loyalty is never absolute, and the next twist, the next shock, is always closer than anyone realizes. And as the tension reached near unbearable heights, with every character in Genoa City teetering on the edge of revelation, betrayal, and heartache, Jack's meticulous orchestration began to reveal its final subtleties, those quiet, almost invisible manipulations that would only make sense in hindsight, because while the overt moves, the saving of Matt, the nudging of his actions, the planting of doubts and suspicions, were dramatic enough, it was in the subtle, nearly imperceptible nudges that Jack's true genius shone, the whispered encouragement here, the half-smile there, the carefully phrased suggestion that seemed casual yet carried enormous weight, shaping Matt's perceptions, altering the way he interpreted Victor's behavior, and driving him inexorably toward choices that would serve the ultimate goal, and all the while, Victor remained trapped in the maze, sensing danger but unable to pinpoint it, his instincts screaming that something monumental was unfolding, that his control, his empire, his carefully cultivated power, were under threat from a source he trusted, a source he never suspected, while Nikki, caught between fear and hope, between loyalty to her family and her instinctive trust in Jack, felt the emotional strain of watching events spiral beyond anyone's control, and even as she sought to intervene, to provide guidance, to prevent disaster, the invisible hand of Jack's plan kept her on the periphery, unable to influence the ultimate outcome, her actions, foreshadowing only minor ripples in a storm that had been engineered with ruthless precision, and Matt, at the center of the storm, wrestled with conflicting emotions, gratitude for having been saved, fear of the unknown, anger at Victor's relentless manipulation, and an almost unconscious compulsion to follow Jack's guidance, the subtle cues that led him to act in ways that seemed spontaneous, yet were carefully choreographed. A dance of deception that would culminate in a confrontation so charged, so explosive, that it could redefine every relationship, power structure, and long-standing alliance in Genoa City. And as the city held its breath, the ripple effects of Jack's plan radiated outward, affecting everyone who had ever crossed paths with Victor or the Newman family, creating tension, paranoia, and uncertainty, so that even casual conversations carried hidden meanings, glances held unspoken threats, and the emotional landscape of the city itself seemed transformed, charged, with the kind of suspense that made every heartbeat echo louder. Every whisper seemed consequential, every decision potentially catastrophic, and as